As I just mentioned before, I spent time in China and I spent many different places. And after 28 years, I continuously start to think about myself, what's next and what's innovation that we can do to create more and better impact for our organizations. And I stumbled upon a couple of dimensions which I want to share with all of you in this session. Let me see how I make this work forward. Yes. A little bit about myself. I'm a continuous learner. I actually took up a master's in philosophy this year to deepen my knowledge. There's so much beautiful knowledge out there in the world, and I think it's a shame just to leave it as it is. You could also see my professional experience. I founded a business school in China, and then I moved to kind of different countries in the pursuit of becoming better at L&D, really. And now I just started to do the Global Curiosity Institute, which is a new initiative in helping companies and individuals, professionals to get in tune with their curiosity. It's really exciting to be part of a startup. I worked in a number of companies, and so some other things I'm doing. So you're seeing a little bit where I'm coming from. I have a global perspective. I've worked with smaller and big companies in different industries, and that's what led me to lead where I am now. Let's get started. I think you could all, relate to these specific individuals, but also the notion of head scratching. And I think we in L&D also have been doing our share of head scratching, not only since March and COVID hit us, but already before that. All the conferences talk about ROI, are we driving impact? What's the next thing? Are we there to push? Are we there to pull? And all these type of things. And not only COVID and the recent health, but also economic downturn has actually pushed us even more in that direction. And I think that's a good picture to set this stage. There's about two things I want to leave you with, or two themes I want to discuss in this specific presentation. First of all, what might be our role as L&D professionals in the year 2020. And I'll be exploring some areas about looking forward, looking backward, celebrating the past, moving towards the future. Are we focusing only on primary skills, secondary skills, or also meta skills, which is a new dimension? Are we continuing to get orders from our businesses, or are we co-creating the future with strategy enablement? And also, I think, what can we do to ensure our employees thrive in the environment of work from home, where basically there's a different ecosystem starting, and maybe if the employees are sitting in different spaces, maybe that's also an opportunity for us as L&D to upgrade ourselves and maybe start providing different services to our people. Let's start. I think you can all relate to how much things are changing, and then things not only changed because of COVID. COVID only accelerated things. And I think our combined industries, and of course, I don't know all the people that are listening to these sessions, but our combined industries have been changing dramatically and will change. And it's not because of our industries are changing, our ecosystems are changing. Derek was just talking about in Signify, in the lighting business, how technology is being brought into the space of homes, into the space of learning. I joined Philips when Philips was moving from analog into the LED business. So that was the first step of technology, and that's not really a long time ago. So it's amazing how these things are happening. And also something not 5 years ago, but something that just came out really recently, I think as early as last week, I think, was the World Economic Forum coming up with a beautiful report on the status of jobs in a new era. And there, I think it's an important thing to see there, about 40% reskilling needs. 50% of the people will be needing reskilling. And then I'm thinking immediately and putting my hat on as an L&D professional, this is great, so I'm going to get more budgets. This is great because things are happening, but for me, and kind of suddenly the world is looking at me. And I'm also seeing that with many companies where learning and development and learning is becoming a board conversation more than anything else. And we might touch upon that later. But how on earth am I going to do this as an L&D professional? Am I going to throw more courses at people? Am I going to get more online libraries out there and tell people that they have to get certified? Or something else? Because reskilling isn't really skilling, isn't really upskilling. Reskilling is completely dynamically changing people's skills. Before they had some analog skills and now they need digital skills. So it's not even building on the past, it's retuning altogether. And when you're looking at the top 10 skills, you see here analytical thinking, innovation, active learning, learning strategy, corporate problem solving. These are the top 10 skills. How many, that's probably a question I'd like to ask all of us here around the room, how many of us are actually having proactive courses, resources, communities, anything, which is actually topics? Or are we more focusing on driving product skills, leadership skills, and all of the other things? You see leadership here on number 6, I think it is, as one dimension. But how much are we really training 50% or 100% of our people, or preparing people in this regard? And I think if I have to look at all the companies that I was part of and the companies I'm now mentoring, few of us actually are focusing on this. We're focusing much more on the primary and the secondary skills and are hoping that skills like analytical thinking, innovation, learning strategies are brought in when we recruit people. And I think that's a big challenge. Actually, there are opportunities, and we're going to talk about that. So basically, I think we have a beautiful opportunity to retune ourselves, to reskill ourselves as L&D professionals, but also retune things for the people that we have at heart in our organizations. And I think we need to start looking or putting up different lenses, if you wish, in the pursuit of this learning. Maybe a quick point on L&D. What I find such a beautiful thing about being for such a long time in L&D already. There's so much variety. There's so much diversity in L&D. And I think it's a beautiful thing because you have people from product management, you have people from project management, people from behavioral part, people from HR, all mingling together in the L&D space and driving what they think is best. Now, at the same time, the other side of that coin is that in L&D we don't have a baseline of knowledge. And somehow I've noticed that we're all approaching learning and development from our own single perspective. How I see the world is going to be the way I want to be taught, and I'm going to kind of transfer that to my instructional design, the courses and the services I'm creating. And I think that's something that's haunting also the L&D profession, and that has been challenging for all of us. And I think together with, I guess, HR, L&D is probably the only function in companies that doesn't require a degree to get into that space. It's changing though, and I see a lot of good things happening with Josh Bersin setting up an academy. Nick van Dam is setting up a beautiful program with Nine Road, and there's other places where there are opportunities for people to upskill themselves. Within Cognizant, we did it ourselves. We set up a program to drive skilling within the organization, and we focused on two things. First of all, going back to basics. What is adult education all about? What is the psychological underpinning? What's the difference between behavioralism and constructivism, and maybe metacognitivism, which is the latest the driver? And how do you design for a program with a behavioralist mindset versus how do you design for a program with a constructivist mindset? And the more we were able to share those deep thoughts with people, confidence levels grew dramatically. because suddenly we became a profession on steroids in the organization. Another point which I really find really important for us in L&D to drive is the use of data. And how much are we celebrating data? Maybe we could talk about it a little bit later too. Now, in terms of the options for L&D in all of this turbulence, this is a concept I've been working on for a couple of years now, actually more than a couple of years. And on the one hand, you say, okay, what are the possibilities to celebrate the past, and what are the things that on the other side to prepare the future? And then I would probably like to ask us a question. To all of us, are we in the business to pushing classes? Are we here to pull curiosity? Wouldn't be great that L&D is not the place where people go to, but L&D is the place where people draw information from, where L&D is not a function of just going to learn something, but also this is a space where I can contribute to. I find it amazing how many resources we have in our respective organizations. When I was at Cognizant, I said I have 300,000 trainers because every single person has something beautiful to share. So what do I need to do to set up a platform for people to actually share that knowledge? And I think it's beautiful. Also, and I'm not going to go through all these points, but are we in the business of knowledge transfer? Or are we in the business of driving a culture and climate for the organizations? Are we owning learning end to end through LMSs and through our tooling? Or do we get out of the way and let learning happen? So are we a supermarket or are we a boutique shop? And there's a number of other dimensions you can find here about deeper options, and this is fundamental stuff, and especially for the people that are owning organizations, this could be a good point, a good kind of starting point to think about what type of business do I want to be in. Of course, you're always part of an ecosystem, and sometimes you might want to lean more on the blue versus the orange, but this is a mental model I wanted to leave with you. An interesting part also, I think we did some survey recently, very recent, is that indeed reskilling is causing CEOs quite a number of headaches. The world is just changing too fast. We need new skills. And these skills will widen even more, and that's kind of airing a little bit what the World Economic Forum was talking about. Now, interestingly, we did another survey with a different target group, not with the CEOs, but the people reporting into those CEOs and within those organizations. And this was only done for Europe. So there's no validation towards kind of the emerging markets, Asia Pacific, Africa, but I could probably make a case that maybe the United States might be also falling in this bracket. Without having done the research. Interestingly, about 65% of people, they say, I'm fine with where I am. I'm fine with the knowledge that I have. So only about 35% of the people in my language are curious enough to follow the CEO's big dreams for the future. And that tension is something dangerous, because part of that survey is also, it's not only about the people, it's also about the organizations. Often there's a correlation that people in this bracket of the 65% saying that my current skill sets will last them throughout my career, those often they work for companies who don't have a very strong rotation policy, or who don't have a very strong L&D driver. L&D in a number of companies is not seen as productive time. You see. So, but it's also, of course, a driver of the individual mentality of people, whether they're. So that's it. I think it's an interesting thing to take care of. Let's not assume that everybody's naturally curious, that everybody wants to change things. Often people just want to come to work because they want to and have to pay the bills, and they don't care about the big dreams that the CEO and their managers have. Let's move to the role of L&D is to add value and impact. I think you'd all agree with me on that. And I think I found a nice little cartoon I taught Fluff to count to 3, and then the other person says, I can't hear him counting. And then the trainer says, just because I taught it doesn't mean he caught it. And I think sometimes that's also a challenge that we're having in L&D, I think. All the good things that we're doing might or might not really be transferred to an environment. And I think that spells maybe a little bit of a driver or a suggestion. I have to go back to basics. How do people really learn? And how do people learn at work? And there's beautiful work being done by Jane Hart. And I'm a great believer in the concept of modern workplace learning, which for me is the next stage beyond the 70-20-10 approach, for a simple reason that modern workplace learning also takes care of resources, also takes care of knowledge management as part of the learning, how people learn. And you can see here that people learn through discovery, which we call informal learning. People learn through talking to others, listening to others, like the conversation that we're having now. You're picking up something from me, and I'll be picking up something from you. Doing the day job, experiential learning. The work is learning, and learning is work. And then only on number 4 is typically by L&D, what we could call didactics, which is the formal learning, which is probably the 10% in the 70-20-10 dynamic. But I think it's an interesting part for all of us now, especially with COVID. How do we allow for discovery more? I think there's a session on resources, kind of courses versus resources. That's a beautiful area for us to focus into. There's so much knowledge that we have in our organizations. Maybe it's the part of L&D to make sense of that knowledge for the specific target groups of our group. At Cognizant, we created My Learning Studio, which is exactly that. Where it was a page where we combined all the beautiful knowledge in the organization. If people wanted to learn about IoT or about machine learning, they went to a space and they could find books and articles and classes and communities. And it ended up to be the 3rd most successful website in the entire company, because people are really curious, and just you need to create an environment for people to get there. How do you invite people to have better discourses, better communications? What I mentioned earlier about that every single individual in the organizations is a trainer, is somebody who can also contribute to knowledge in your organizations. And I'm really serious about that, because every person, I'm always saying that every person has something great to share with at least one other person. And probably more than one other person. So how do you create an environment where people can actually do this? And I think there's a beautiful space for L&D to be set up to think about that. How do we structure it, given the culture and the environment of our organizations, and how do we really celebrate all that knowledge that we're having? So I think you get a sense of it all. Now, if we're focusing on didactics, and there I want to kind of lead into the notion of metaphysics, not metaphysics, hear me doing too much philosophy nowadays, to the notion of meta skills, is that typically we in L&D have been focusing on what I call primary and secondary skills. And I'm going to share the next slide to drive this. And primary skills for me are, and not for me, that's kind of standard stuff, I guess. Primary skills are the skills that you need to get in the door. If you're a technician, you need to have technical skills. If you're an HR professional, you need functional skills. These are the skills that get you in the door and drive things. And you could probably say that in most organizations, 80 to 90% of the learning investments is focused on those skills. And then you have secondary skills, which is focusing on behaviors. These are not the skills that get you in the door, but these are the skills that keep you in the job. And these are typically what we often refer to as soft skills. You could also call them durable skills. I was reading recently Simon Brown's book, the Curiosity Advantage, and he's talking about power skills, which is also a beautiful driver. But these are the skills that typically HR is owning and is driving for people. And you're talking communication skills, creativity skills, problem-solving skills, and the like. And often we in learning and development are focusing on those two areas. Now, maybe let's to the notion of the World Economic Forum that we heard earlier, or that we spoke about earlier, about the 10 different skill areas. How on earth do you teach people about learning strategies? How do you teach people curiosity, a growth mindset? And there's a workshop on growth mindset this afternoon in the conference. How do you do all of that? And I'm noticing that in our L&D groups, in most companies, we've been focusing pretty much on the first and the second skills, because that's what so few really focus on skills. There used to be inside to how much part of budget. Well, you might have heard me talk about the difference between what I call A players and B players. A players are people that are naturally curious and they're naturally learning all the time. And you don't need them to send them to any single course because they're on top of their game. They're part of the right networks. They're part of they ask the right questions. They read the right books, and they often pay for their own online courses because they feel the need to do that. And then you have the B players, which are typically the people that want to learn, but they miss something. And they need a little bit of electricity to become A players, or to get going with learning, in a sense. They need a performance discussion with a manager, they need learning goals, they need support, they need a company to say, here are the courses, they need a portal and those types. These are the B players. And in L&D, we are catering for B players. In some programs, in some companies, we might have a high potential program, but by and large, high potentials are typically less than 1/10% or so of organizations. So focusing on habits and mindset, I think, is a great opportunity for all of us to drive. And I have curiosity, growth mindset, and learn to learn as the biggest drivers for that. And maybe you could start thinking already a little bit on how you create these. Now, the beauty with this is that if everybody is an A player in your organization, you're liberated. Because the more you create these habits and mindset amongst your people, the less quote unquote courses you have to do, because people just get on with things and they find their own way of skilling. And they can do it faster than you, and you have the opportunity to get out of the way and to focus on really dramatically strategic areas. And that's how actually I've managed to do things in pretty much the last 4 or 5 companies of where I was working. Now, for me, curiosity has 3 dimensions. Curiosity about the world. How am I looking at things outside of me? Curiosity about others. How much do I learn about Bruce, about Derek? How much do I know about other people and the people that work next to me, especially now in COVID times? How much do we enable our muscle of empathy with others, and how curious about others? And then the third one, probably the most difficult one, is how curious are we about ourselves? about my drivers, my strengths, my beliefs, but also my limiting beliefs, my values, my purpose. In the next talk, I think we're going to hear something that is kind of alluding to this, which I'm really keen to listen. Now, curiosity, I think most people that I'm asking is, are you curious? And they will always say, yes, I am absolutely curious. And curiosity for me, therefore, is a beautiful meta skill to focus on, because it empowers learning. It makes people more receptive to learning. Think of yourself if you're listening to a boring podcast, or versus a really exciting one, or that something that you're really interested about versus that somebody pushes you to take. The more you're interested, the more you're receptive. Interestingly, curiosity is not only driven by how you're standing in the world, but is also supporting by how your organization is, or how your manager is behaving. We did quite a bit of research within Cognizant, and interestingly, Simon Brown in Novartis also did similar interest, and I call it the shadow of a manager. If the manager is learning a lot, and talks a lot about it and says, okay, I've been reading these books and I've been doing this, very interesting between team are also learning or not. If the manager doesn't value learning, you see the learning within the team also dropping down to dramatic lows, which is interesting, but which is sad. So I probably encourage all of you to get back into your data and to see whether there's also a correlation there within your own organizations. Beautiful is that, like all habits, curiosity, growth mindset, and the likes can be taught, can be acquired. And there's actually beautiful ways for people to do that. And actually psychology and NLP and other things have been kind of leading the way for the last 20, 30 years and telling us how really we can do that. And the beauty of it all, I think, is the more people are curious, the less we need to push. And the more strategic things will get for us, and the more the organizations will benefit. Here I'd love to share a little bit with you. We've got about 3 minutes left, so we're kind of well in time. How do you teach that stuff? For instance, curiosity. How do you teach meta skills? And in Cognizant, we were able to teach people on this. What we did is we did short online sessions, about 45 minutes, where basically we were not focusing on knowledge transfer. We were focusing on sharing mental models, and I often refer to the notion of language. We're giving people words, because the moment they have words, people have language, they can start reflecting on themselves. If a person has never put a mindset in the same combination of words, growth mindset, then he or she will not be able to reflect whether they have a growth mindset or not. I might have a growth mindset in my office space, but I might have a fixed mindset in my private space. And the moment you have language, you start thinking about these dynamics. And 3 months past these shorter sessions, we asked people, actually, are you willing to do something new, or did these learnings kind of make you tick? And you see here, it's amazing how many people are actually valuing the input they're getting, because the moment you share people that language, people have the opportunity. I'm not saying that they will all do so, but at least they can start reflecting, and then they have a decision point. Do I want to do something about it or not? And with the right marketing, the right guidance, that is definitely something that can happen. Interestingly, also, we did analytics about their normal learning hours. And I know it's an old-fashioned way of measuring learning, but at least it's one indicator. And we said, okay, let's look at, for all the people, let's look at the learning hour consumption prior to these workshops and 1 year later. Whether there's any difference, and you see that from 25 hours it jumped to 40 plus hours, just by focusing as L&D on learning and development and by honing their meta skills around curiosity, growth mindset, but also learn to learn. I think that's an important part also, is to teach people the how. And I'd be interested to hear how many people are actually doing this. Not for select audiences, but for the entire audiences that you're responsible for. So these are the things I wanted to share with you. What's our role in 2020, and what can we do to ensure employees thrive? And I'm looking forward to the questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. Very, very interesting. Loving the references to the versus boutique, but also loving the idea that we don't actually teach them, but people actually come to learn and they can actually then take it themselves and focus on what I've been. So, do we have any questions from this amazingly wonderful and vast audience coming in? And if not, I have a couple which I just want to check in with you first.
Maybe also let's maybe in the chat. There is. I don't know whether I'm not too good at it. I guess I don't see anything. Okay. Shoot, Derek.
There's one other question. It's basically you talked about these people who are kind of the A and the B, but how do you find them? Because how do you know in your organization are people who are kind of the more reactive waiting to be learned versus the people who are kind of doing it? How do you identify them? How did you guys identify them?
You know, and the direct manager knows who their stars are, who are the people that are willing to go the extra mile. People know who they are, and you probably could say that it's about 10-15% of such people in the organization. Now, interestingly, this is a trait, not a state. People need the right environment to be an A player. You might be an A player in your current job, but when things change, you might become a B player because the environment is not conducive for you to be in flow, and to be really on top of your game. So it doesn't mean that you're all your life an A player, but it's something that you could celebrate. You don't know about you. There's no lists running around in the companies who is a natural A players. You people know, and you focus on that. These are the people that you want to have teaching your programs. These are that you want to celebrate. I remember when I was at Philips, we took in all of our 17 markets the best sales guys out, and we gave them a 1-year assignment to start training and coaching other sales guys. You know who these people are.
Okay. Cool. And I think that's true. But it also kind of, I know you're the L&D track, but it also kind of imagine impacts the talent track, because it then makes you, or helps you identify talent in a different way. Because we normally have these kind of measures for talent, but actually maybe one of the talents we look for going forward is actually the talent to actually want to share and educate others as well. So it's kind of one of the things which we don't maybe focus on as being an identifiable talent as well. Do we have anything before I ask my second question? Anything else coming in from our audience question-wise? You've got anything in? Just checking on my chat, which is still looking like people have logged in, which is good. But nobody has yet raised the first question. And I think the other one I kind of had was you recorded the learning hours. You had that really cool slide of learning hours, shows what people have learned. Did it also, or how do you, it's a better question, how do you also get the non-professional, the non-business learner as well? Because obviously these people may not do all the stuff with a system or within an environment which you can record it. How do you make sure, how do you combine both sets of learning experiences or hours people are building up? Does it make sense, the question?
Can you repeat the question? No.
Yeah, just checking. So the slide was talking about how many hours people have been learning as a measure. So people were doing more learning after the workshops you did. But I was just thinking, did it also look into the hours of learning people will do outside of work? That's kind of a simple question. Because people may just do stuff socially independently outside. Did you always manage to bring that in as well, or did you manage to record that as well?
No, and we didn't want to, because the philosophy was that we're not here to control every single step of people's driver. If people are really proud of something, that they achieved a certificate or something, they will share it with the organization. And we allowed people to do that, but we were not trying to, because often the driver can be a dynamic of control, which we didn't want to do. It was kind of, we were saying, we're greeting adults. You want to share it, be our guest. You don't want to share it, also good.
Yeah, cool. And I think that's kind of what I was hoping to say. In the context of, just also allowing the flexibility there as well. Cool. I'm just going to again double check. Do we have any other questions or views or observations? It seems, just looking through my app as well, which is hence looking this side. I mean, what would you say was your biggest learning from doing experience?
From which experience?
Stefaan? So from going through the whole of the workshops and changing the culture and red recording, what would you say the biggest learning you had from changing the mindset about how people kind of looked at it and introduced the curiosity philosophy?
Well, it just confirmed to me that people are just naturally curious people if you let them, if you treat them like adults, people that are in charge, are the captains of their own ship. And give them and tell them it's okay to be curious. So it's a big function of culture and climate that I talked about, and there's an opportunity for L&D to focus. And if you celebrate people in that process, magic happens. If you have a more tailorist approach to management, if you consider that the manager is the person who knows it all, who is micromanaging, or an organization that doesn't celebrate learning, as I said, a number of companies are just not seeing learning and development as productive time. On the contrary, it's a waste of time, a waste of resources in quite a number of industries and organizations. So don't expect magic. You might expect magic out of the efficiency part, the day-to-day, but don't think you'll be doing innovation. And I see that during COVID, a lot of companies have been reactive, and some companies have been really proactive, and they're driving their innovation on steroids because of COVID. And that's how do you celebrate people asking questions, ideation. Can people send an email to their CEO saying, "Oh, I've got this great idea, can we explore?" Or are people afraid of doing so? That's a culture that you want to create, and L&D has a beautiful role to play in this space.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the whole focus of, as you said, going away from people who kind of create their supermarket through to not just embedding and bringing in the mindset about culture, about curiosity, but also looking at the culture and the environment, make sure the environment is conducive to these kind of ideas as well. Because if it's not, then people won't flourish. So it's interesting to see our role as L&D professionals is also kind of like the drivers of culture in an organization, as well as the support of the moderators, or whatever you want to call it, of learning opportunities as well.
Absolutely.
Cool. So I think we have a couple more minutes, and again, I'm hoping that the technology is working and we haven't just missed a load of questions, which is one of my concerns about doing these kind of digital things as well. So I'm just going to check in to make sure.
But you know what? If there are questions, people can always contact me on LinkedIn. And I think I've updated my app on my profile on the app, so people can also kind of reach out to me if they want to.
Cool. And I suppose one last thing, anything you would change, anything you think from me?
I'd say, what I would say is to accelerate even more. If you're looking at induction, for instance, maybe to allow induction to be more exploratory, rather than a dump of information type of things, and there's many other opportunities. You can say, how do you bring in curiosity, enablement, celebration of people's knowledge into the fold, and how do you start even earlier with saying that asking the right questions is good, curiosity is good, and please challenge status quo. Now that might require a different leadership style, and you're clearly in that space. How much do you want to empower leaders, or even celebrate leaders who are actually saying, I'm humble, I don't have it all, I don't know everything, let's find out together type of a thing. I think that's a beautiful area to explore.
It's a beautiful way to end the session, I think, as well. I mean, I think it's kind of a whole focus around having leaders who are, I suppose, authentic and open and not concerned about being on so forth. It's a great way to kind of bridge into our second session, which is basically around